Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. The U.S. and Germany sending tanks to Ukraine. This amid reports that Chinese companies are sending military aid to Russia. NTD's R.S.C brings us more from the White House.
The U.S. agrees to send 31 Abrams battle tanks to Ukraine. Biden's Wednesday announcement reverses months of persistent arguments by his administration that these tanks were too difficult for Ukraine to operate and maintain. But such reluctance now comes to an end.
These tanks are further evidence of our enduring, unflagging commitment to Ukraine.
It gives them an offensive, mechanized, armored punching force.
The announcement comes right after Germany agreed to send Ukraine dozens of its own Leopard tanks. Together, the two countries mark the first step of a coordinated effort by Western countries to send Kyiv dozens of heavy weapons.
Putin expected Europe and the United States to weaken our resolve. He expected our support for Ukraine to crumble with time. He was wrong.
But the new package, which is worth $400 million, also comes amid some lawmakers' concerns that the massive amount of equipment and tax money sent to Ukraine lacks oversight and accountability. And the White House says this.
I see no indication that anything we've sent over has ended up in the wrong hands or has been being used inappropriately.
Meanwhile, concerns are rising over China's continued support for Russia. The Biden administration has reportedly confronted the Chinese regime with evidence that Chinese state-owned companies are selling non-lethal military aid to Russia. And I asked National Security spokesperson John Kirby what the U.S. would do about it.
Would the U.S. impose stronger measures than just communicating?
We certainly have been clear in private settings with Chinese leaders that we don't believe that now is the time for business as usual with Russia. We know they're still buying Russian oil, for instance, and it's not clear, whether they will abide by the cap. But this is the time for the international community, and you're seeing so much of it today in this decision, to really continue to rally around Ukraine and to make the right decisions.
Reporting from the White House, R.S.C, NTD News.
As the nation's debt hangs in the balance, the GOP doubling down on a push for spending cuts, while Democrats accuse Republicans of aiming to cut key programs like Social Security. Here's NTD's Melina Wisecup from Capitol Hill.
The urgent need to raise the $31.4 trillion debt ceiling has led to a sharp partisan battle over how to handle the national budget moving forward. Democrats have repeatedly pointed to what they call a lack of clarity in Republicans' plan for spending cuts. And the truth of the matter is, it is quite difficult right now to pin down exactly where Republicans are trying to cut. Although they say that this process is just starting and they do expect this plan to become more clear as those talks continue, Senator Rand Paul was pressed further on some specifics, and he did give a few examples of where they could cut so-called wasteful spending. Here's a look.
Your tax dollars went to the National Science Foundation to hire a guy to put metal gloves on to snap his fingers to see if you can snap your fingers in metal gloves. $700,000 to see if kids are better coped with pets.
And while Republicans deny this claim, Democrats have continuously accused the GOP of aiming to cut programs like Social Security. Now, this comes as the Congressional Budget Office's latest analysis shows that Social Security is expected to be insolvent by 2033. I asked Senate Leader Chuck Schumer what the Democrats' plan is for keeping this program solvent. Here's how he responded.
We will always defend Social Security. Democrats had a plan to make sure that Social Security is solvent.
In addition, Democrats are honing in on a recent proposal made by a few House Republicans, which is called the Fair Tax Act. Now, this would essentially eliminate payroll, personal, and corporate taxes and replace it with a national sales tax. But this is only supported by a handful of Republicans in the House. It's not looking like it's seriously being considered by the conference as a whole in the House or by Senate Republicans on the Senate side. We asked Senator Braun if this is something that he would support. He says he opposes it. Here's why.
So cutting. I heard about that. I think that's mixing too many variables into the discussion because it's not a revenue issue. It's a spending issue.
Now, Congress does have a couple of months of wiggle room before the Treasury runs out of measures that they're using right now to stay under that borrowing cap. McCarthy is set to meet at the White House with President Biden to discuss this issue, although it's unclear when that meeting will happen or how effective that meeting will be, because right now it still looks like McCarthy and President Biden are very far apart on where they stand on the issue. McCarthy aims to use that meeting as a way to negotiate stricter budget measures, while the White House says there will be no negotiation at all. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are introducing legislation that would bar members of Congress from trading stocks. Senator Josh Hawley, a Republican, introduced the PELOSI Act, that stands for Preventing Elected Leaders from Owning Securities and Investments Act. The acronym is also a jab at former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. The act would require members of Congress and their immediate family to relinquish stock holdings or put them into a blind trust within 6 months of entering office. On the Democrat side, you have Representative Angie Craig announcing a similar act. It's called the Halt Unchecked Member Benefits with Lobbying Elimination, or the Humble Act. In a statement, Craig said, "Unfortunately, some of my colleagues have gotten sidetracked by special interest and conflicts of interest." In addition to banning stock trading, the Humble Act would put a lifetime ban on lobbying for congressional members. That, as well as serving on corporate boards while serving in Congress, and flying first class using taxpayer funds. Republican Congressman Tom Tiffany of Wisconsin is leading an effort to build normal diplomatic relations with Taiwan. He just introduced a bill in Congress that would officially end the One China policy. Under this policy, the U.S. ended formal relations with Taiwan in 1979. Congressman Tiffany agreed to speak with us exclusively today to discuss the bill. Congressman Tom Tiffany, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to join you today, Steve.
Congressman, you're reintroducing a bill to establish normal diplomatic relations between the United States and Taiwan. Tell us, what do normal diplomatic relations actually look like?
Well, it should look like with dozens, if not hundreds, of countries around the world. Taiwan has been put on the same footing since the Carter era as North Korea and other recalcitrant countries like that. Shouldn't they be treated? Taiwan, it's a democratic country. Since 1979, they've expanded their democracy and are truly a peace-loving, free country here on planet Earth, and I think they should be recognized as such.
You know, it's fast. As somebody who's been to both countries, China and Taiwan, the differences are literally palpable. From the flags that they fly to the type of government that they operate. So why do you think we've seen such a playing of words when it comes to recognizing Taiwan?
You know, I'm not sure why. What you said there really harks back to the trip that I made to Taiwan, and I noticed just at times the fear by some government officials towards mainland China. That really struck me, and it's informed me as we've went forward. And to me, this is why we need this bill. And it's good to see it's expanding in terms of the number of co-sponsorships. When we did it a couple years ago, it was me alone. And now this year we're going to have 18 original co-sponsors. And I think it's really, there's more and more people in Congress that are understanding how important Taiwan is and how important that we recognize Taiwan and that we trade with Taiwan.
And do you think that maybe one lesson that we're learning with Ukraine, or an example that we're seeing with Ukraine, the importance for members of Congress and government officials, elected officials, to show their support for Taiwan, so that, like you said, when you went there, you don't see the fear and trepidation from Taiwan officials over China?
Support shows strength. When you look at the Ukraine, what were the two things that Vladimir Putin took from 2021? One, America is no longer going to be energy independent under President Biden, and then the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. They saw weakness. It is really important, and that's part of the reason we're introducing this bill, is to show strength, and I think Congress has a key role to play in that.
And speaking of which, Speaker McCarthy announced that he will be making a trip to Taiwan in the coming weeks or months. How important do you think that will be, that trip?
Really good news. You know, in spite of President Biden being really hesitant on this issue, including his foreign policy team, it was good that Speaker Pelosi made the trip to Taiwan. But I'm really heartened to hear that Speaker McCarthy is going to make a trip to Taiwan, and I think this benefits This benefits Taiwan, but it also benefits America, and once again it shows strength. And I think Congress really needs to do that, in part because we have this vacuum at this point in the executive branch of showing that America is a strong country, and we need to project that, because sometimes that keeps the bad guys or our adversaries at bay.
Congressman, my last question for you. In Washington, D.C., it's the capital of the country. We also have a lot of think tanks here, and sometimes when you talk to so-called China experts, they'll lecture you as to how we should not upset the Chinese government. How concerning is this?
Well, you have to know who you're talking to out here in Washington, D.C., and find out what their agenda is. And our agenda in our office, and we try to make it clear to any think tanks, any lobbyists, is that we believe the one China policy needs to end, and we believe in a free, democratically run Taiwan, and we should recognize them as such.
Congressman Tom Tiffany, thank you so much.
It's good to join you, Steve.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.